Ben.
Ben Anderson, Chair of the Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails Organization, and also Stearns County Parks Director.
Awesome. Joe.
Joe Chupesky, System Plan Coordinator for the Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission.
Awesome. Patrick.
Hi, everyone. I'm Patrick Hollister with Partnership for Health. We're the combined public health departments of Becker, Clay, Otter Tail, and Wilkin counties. And I'm so angelic, I have my own halo.
Nice. Jessica.
Hi, everybody. Jess Peterson, Parks and Recreation Manager for the City of Duluth.
Terry.
Hi, I'm Terry Levgren, and I am a Pine County Commissioner.
Nice. Thank you. Heather.
Heather Corcoran, Director of Legislative Affairs and Policy for the City of Rochester.
Paul.
Paul Burvick. I'm with Fargo Moorhead Metropolitan Council of Government.
Nice. Jeremy. I guess we're skipping Jeremy. Zachary.
Zach Dubay, City of Wade Park Public Works Supervisor.
Nice. Tim.
Okay, Tim Nelson, Cook County Parks and Trails Director.
Awesome. Looks like we scared Susan from Mankato off. I should have done the direction introductions after that. Well, thank you again. I'm just going to dive in. This is our second forum this year. We really appreciate everyone getting on there. I'm going to be talking a lot, so I would encourage you to, if you have questions, to either raise your hand physically or put it in the chat or use the other functions. Brad and Carlin will keep an eye on things for me and interrupt me if you have questions. I have sort of a script that I work off of, but I'd love to have you ask questions about anything. So sort of the goal of our monthly forum is to talk about basically what's going on at the legislature with our parks and trails goals. Generally, give you some information on specific bills, give you some tips and tricks as appropriate in terms of what you can do, and then answer your questions. So I'm going to dive in and talk about what's happening at the legislature. I don't know if you read my legislative update a few weeks ago, but it's been crazy at the legislature. Things have really been moving fast and furious. The Senate passed 8 bills in January, which may not sound like a lot, but that's more bills that were passed than the 6 previous Januaries combined. And both the House and Senate have surpassed records for introductions of bills. Now, the one thing I will mention is that the bills that have passed have generally not affected our agenda, but there has been movement on some of the ones that we are concerned about. So they haven't hit the floor yet, but we are seeing movement. One other thing I do want to mention is that we had our legislative action day sort of before, almost a month ago now, but it was after our last forum, and we had a number of you participate, and I really appreciate that. I think it made a huge difference, so very much appreciated. And I'm just going to kind of walk through our goals. Sort of as an organization, we have 4 primary things that we are working on here at the legislature, and I'm going to walk through each one of those, tell them where we're at. The first is on legacy funding. As you may know, one of the main reasons that this group was founded was to sort of try and get Greater Minnesota's share of the legacy funds, protect what we have, and at times hopefully increase funding. The legislature is kind of, I would say, over the last, it's been a decade now, sort of gotten into this groove of legacy funds are split 40% to the DNR, 40% to the metropolitan area, 20% to Greater Minnesota. Would we like more? Yes. Is it feasible for us to probably divide up the legacy funding formula? Probably not. So what we're doing instead, and I'll talk about that under our other goals, is we are making efforts to try and find increased funding in other places. So there hasn't been a hearing yet on the 40-40-20. Basically, where it will show up is in the legacy bill. And there hasn't been a hearing sort of generally on a legacy bill in the House. They did have an introductory hearing on Parks and Trails. With respect to legacy, Renee Matheson from the commission testified. She actually did a really good job. I think that there were a lot more questions probably of DNR and of Metro than there were of than of Greater Minnesota. And I know that sort of the report and all the work that the commission has done has been really, impressing a lot of people. We haven't had a Senate sort of get to know you hearing yet, but Renee and I met with the Senate chair, who's Senator Hur, who chairs the Legacy Committee in the Senate, and he was interested in doing that. So we might see that in the next week or two. I will point out that the governor's bill on legacy has been introduced, and the legislature doesn't have to follow the governor's bill, but typically with respect to legacy, they tend to follow the governor's legacy bill a lot more than they do other governor's bills. And the governor's bill does include that 40-40-20 split. And we've not heard of any efforts by anyone to disrupt that formula. Usually, honestly, if there was going to be some disruption, it would be coming from the Metro, from one particular corner of that sort of lobbying organization group, but we haven't seen anything yet. Obviously, we will be keeping things very close eye on that. But I think at least right now, it looks like, what's happening with the 40-40-20, we should get our 20%, which is great. The number that was predicted was higher than I think what was originally budgeted. We'll get the final budget forecast on Monday, but there are maybe more funds available, for projects for this year or next year. We don't know yet, but it's looking good there. So again, feeling great about the 40-40-20 and what's going on with legacy. Now let's talk about our efforts to try to get more money for Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails. And I want to talk about our legislation, which is HF 873 and SF 527. And that's a bill in the House. It's authored by Representative David Lizlegard. In the Senate, it's authored by Senator Grant Hauschild. And it's a pretty simple bill. It would provide $500,000 each to the commission out of general fund. And what that means is that the money out of legacy that is currently paying for the commission's work could now be freed up to fund projects. So they would be giving us, not a huge amount, but it is, an extra 500,000 a year, an extra $1 million per biennium to put for more projects. And it's really, I think that's really exciting. It's going to be the House is going to be the harder push. I'll be honest. The person who is the chair of the Environment Committee, which is where this shows up, is not as crazy about Greater Minnesota as all of us are, to put it nicely. And so what we've really been doing is really making an effort on, adding more authors and really kind of pressuring, a lot of people. We were very fortunate. I happen to have Jessica Peterson from Duluth. She was here at our Legislative Action Day, and it turns out that the chair of Ways and Means this year is from Duluth and actually knows Jessica. So we were actually able to do a drop-in appointment and sort of raise this issue to her. So she got on our bill and she is familiar with it. We've been working to add more legislators so far. I want you to listen as I'm reading these off and make sure that your legislator, House representative that is on this list, because if they're not, you're going to have a task. But we've got Representative Lizlegard from Aurora, Representative Jeff Brand from St. Peter, Representative Frederick from Mankato, Representative Liz Olson, as I mentioned, from Duluth, Representative Purcell from Northfield, Representative, I'm going to say this wrong, Seleznikar from, I think she's either Hermantown or Proctor. It's right next to Duluth. And then Representative Wolgamott from St. Cloud. They have all signed on to the bill. Representative Lilly and Representative Heintzman have promised us they would, but then we had a snow day this week. So Renee or I will be following up with them next week. But I think it's, again, the thing about House bills, you may notice, is that you can have up to 35 authors on there. So we'd like to add more authors, both Republican or Democrat, particularly if they're in the Environment Committee, but honestly, any of them. So I would just ask and encourage all of you, again, whether you have a Republican legislator or a Democratic legislator, to reach out to them and just tell them how important this is and ask them to sign on to HF 873. In the Senate, it is a little bit different in terms of authors. You can only have 5, and we filled that up right away from across the state. Like I said, Senator Grant Hauschild from Hermantown is our lead author. Renee and I, Renee Matson from the commission did talk to, the Senate Environment Chair this week, and he told us we'd get a hearing. We are going to be following up on that. He seems to be a lot more sympathetic about the need to put more money into Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails. So even though, he's a St. Paul legislator, I would say he's, didn't promise us he was going to fund this, but he's definitely more favorably inclined. And so it's something we're going to have to keep working on. But I would say this is the second or third time we've introduced this bill, and this is the best reception we've had so far. There's still a lot to get done and still a lot of push. That's why we need sort of help from all of you in terms of encouraging that. Does anyone have any questions?
I do, if you have a second. So the handout that we just got on the chat, is that something that I can send to our representative to see if he can join?
Let me see. Yes, that's the legislative handout. You can absolutely send that to them. It kind of explains what the bill is, and just for your representative, like your senator, we'd love that their support. There's no more room on the bill. But for the House of Representatives, yes, that link that Ben put on the chat is exactly what you can send there. So
I will send that to him today. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's what we love to hear. So any other questions on that bill? Like I said, we've got a long time between now and when the budget is done, but I feel better about this bill. I have to say particularly, well, we have great authors, honestly, in both the Senate and the House. But I've been particularly impressed with Senator Hauschild who's a new legislator. He took over from Tom Bach's seat, and he's been pretty assertive in trying to help Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails out. So it's been really nice to watch. The next sort of priority we had after this is, sorry, I was making a note to myself of including something, is the LCCMR. And I don't know how familiar you are with the LCCMR. That's the Legislative Citizens Commission on Minnesota Resources. And what that is they basically make recommendations every year on how funding from the Environmental Natural Resource Trust Fund should be spent. And over the last, I would say 6 or 7 years, we've made it a priority to try and ensure that their recommendations include money for the local Parks and Trails Grants Program. As important as Legacy is, we recognize that, some of your parks and trails just don't qualify for Legacy, but you do qualify for these local Parks and Trails grants. And so it's really important that they have funding. So when you go ask for a grant, that, you have a much better chance of getting it. So the LCCMR recommendations this year include $3.8 million to those, as well as projects, quite a few projects. Most of them actually are members of our organization are also recommended for funding. Some parks, some trails, but it is another opportunity for getting funding. I'm mentioning that right now as sort of a side note. This is not about legislation, but one of the things, again, if you're looking for help funding, the LCCMR process, it is, I would say it's not the easiest process because you have to do an application and then you have to, try to get selected for hearing or whatnot, but it is definitely something you should consider, especially if whatever your project is more natural resource focused. I think it's a really good program. And I'm mentioning it because applications are open right now. And it's one of those things, if you're thinking about doing it, you can typically have your application reviewed by email if you get it to the staff far enough in advance. So anyways, going back to the actual LCCMR bill, we are very thrilled that they recommended $3.8 million for local parks and trails, plus a bunch of money for individual members. One of the things we were not excited about, however, was that the bill as written would basically now impose a requirement that for any project that was sort of park or trail construction related, it would require a 50% match. Now, I know that for bonding, that's often required, but in other, this is one of the few areas where you can get funding without a complete, 50% match. And that's really important, especially for a lot of our communities in Greater Minnesota. There's not as many opportunities for funding. And having to come up with half of your funding sometimes can make it so your project doesn't move forward. So we were very concerned about that match and spent, we alerted both Senator Hauschild and Senator Hoffman, who is from the Metro, worked on trying to get that language removed. Again, I want to thank Jessica Peterson. She's probably never going to want to show up for Legislative Action Day again, but I dragged her around to all of the Duluth legislators, having her explain to them why this bill was a concern. But I'm going to be honest, I really do think that made a difference. The day before they had a vote on this, I actually was meeting with Grant Hauschild about something else. And he's like, Liz, I don't think we can do this. And then all of a sudden the next day, it changed and they removed it. And we are hearing some rumblings that it may have happened because of the influence of Duluth on their legislators, because their senator is the vice chair of that committee. So thanks to Jessica and all the folks in Duluth. We still have to get that bill to a conference committee, and they have to, we'll have to keep the Senate position. But I think the fact that we've been able to get this much done, I think, is really important. So we will keep you updated when that gets to, further action. In terms of like the floor and then conference committee, we'll be putting letters in. We might do an action alert, but, big thanks to everybody who helped on that. Wasn't something I was expecting we'd have to work on this year, at least that match part. So it's great to be nimble. One other thing I want to mention, like I said, there's $3.8 million in there for the local Parks and Trails grants programs. Those programs are accepting applications through the end of March. It's on the DNR webpage. We also have links on our website to those. If you've never applied for one of those, or if you've applied in the past, either way, please take a look at it. The Trail Connections is helping you get like from one place to another in your city or county. The outdoor recreation piece is a bit more expansive. Some people use it for natural playgrounds. Some people use it for, might be restrooms, all kinds of stuff. And it's a really great program, and it's really important because we've been pushing hard on getting money in there. I really want to see some of our members trying to get those funds. So if you have a project that, fits those criteria, please apply. And we had at our Legislative Action Day, we had folks from the DNR come in and talk to us about those grants. And one thing they emphasized is that they will review your application in advance if you get it to them in enough time. And they said that is one of the best things you can do for a successful grant, because a lot of people, they unintentionally might leave things out or not explain things properly. So if you're applying for one of those grants, please take advantage of that review process. So this is one of those years where everything we've been working on, things have been going well so far. Again, it's not over till it's over, but at least it's a good start to the session. Usually I'm a little more gloomy this time of year because we haven't been able to get any progress. But the bonding bill was unveiled on now 2 weeks ago. And this is, as you may recall, there was no bonding bill last year. So this is an attempt to do an early bonding bill to try and get some money out there for projects that would have been funded last year. I was very pleased to see that it did include $2 million again for those DNR Parks and Trails programs. And then something else that might be of interest to some of you, there's also $4 million for skate parks. And I know that, a number of different cities have been interested in skate parks. And there's $4 million to the Amateur Sports Commission for skate parks in that bill as well. Of course, now we're waiting to see what happens with this bill. It's up in what's called the Ways and Means Committee in the House on Monday, and then it has to go to Senate Finance. Unlike other bills, this bill requires because it is general obligation bonds, it requires a supermajority of votes. That means they're going to need Democratic votes and Republican votes to pass it. I think in the House, it's probably not an exaggeration to say that the Republican lead on bonding probably wants to get this bill done even more than the Democrat does. So I think at the end of the day, they are going to come up with enough Republican votes in the House to get a bonding bill passed, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. The Senate, it is less certain. just, I won't get into the ins and outs, but right now the Senate Republicans have been much more cool to this idea. We're hoping they will change because, again, in addition to those 2 projects I mentioned to you, there's just a lot of things that need to get done across the state. In addition to parks and trails, I work on wastewater, and let me tell you, we really, really need money going into wastewater now. So it's just, really hoping we can get some movement there. I would encourage, if you have a Senate, if you care about the bonding bill and you have a senator who's Republican, urge them to vote to move it forward. But those were our 4 main priorities. But that's not the only thing that's been happening. So I'm going to jump into talking about those next, unless anyone has questions about bonding. No? Okay. Next, lottery in lieu. So there's this thing called lottery in lieu, and it is a funding pool. Basically, when you buy a lottery ticket, you may have noticed, or maybe you've never bought a lottery ticket, but when you buy one, you never have to pay sales tax on it. But the Lottery Commission has to pay the equivalent of what would have been sales tax back to the state. It's called lottery in lieu money. And under statute, it goes out to a bunch of different people. And right now, the DNR gets 22% of that, and the Metropolitan Parks get 22% of that. So it's 76% of the total. The lottery in lieu funding goes to this list. Some goes to outdoor heritage, some goes to the zoos, and then 24% of it goes to the environmental fund. Well, it was honestly, this is like the first or second week of session. We noticed that this was coming up, and it was coming for a hearing to try and switch it so that all of the money went to those recipients. But the problem with that list of recipients is that Greater Minnesota is not on that list. And so we reached out to the Senate author over that weekend because it was getting heard on a Tuesday. Again, it was Grant Housechild, who seems to be the Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails champion for this year. Although he's not the only one helping us, but we talked to him and sort of explained the situation to him. And so he really kind of worked with his colleagues. The bill got postponed in the Senate a couple times, but he's been able to negotiate, getting us not a huge percent, but 2% of that bill. The House, again, not as friendly about this. We had Renee Mattson testified for us, and we sent in a letter, just kind of raising this issue. And the House leader's response was, well, Greater Minnesota doesn't need it because all of the state parks are in Greater Minnesota, and well, the money that goes to outdoor heritage is for fishing, and that's all fishing in Greater Minnesota, so you guys don't need money. Now, obviously, we disagree, but we also knew we weren't going to get anywhere with him. We just wanted our objections to be noted. And so, again, this will have to be conferenced, but we've never made progress in this area. So I'm really hoping we can make this happen. Again, it's not a ton of money, but putting, $1 million or more every year into that pool, I mean, that's another mile of trails. That's more track chairs we can buy. That's another mobile fleet of mountain bikes or something. There's just things we can have done. So again, we may be alerting you with action alerts as that moves on this session. Just a couple other things, that I'll be watching on Tuesday. The finance department unveils the state budget forecast, kind of telling us how much money we really have. Now, you've probably been hearing there's been projections of a $17 billion, $20 billion budget surplus. We do expect there to be a surplus, but one interesting thing happened over the last couple weeks, and that is that the state passed a law changing it so that when the state does its budget forecast, it has to include inflation. Now, you might be wondering, why weren't they including inflation before? Well, 20 years ago, when it looked like the budget was going to go into a deficit, I won't go into all of the sneaking around that happened, but there was a lot of skullduggery, and they basically passed some legislation that pulled inflation out of the forecast, and that's been in place for 20 years. Now they've changed it back to what it was. So
and that's what we heard is, as long as
oh, sorry. So that's what the budget forecast should be, looking a little bit more like that. But what that means, though, is that when we have a forecast, that budget surplus may not look as big as we thought. We're not certain though, how it will impact, but I did want to point that out. There are some interesting bills I've been watching, and including, again, I don't know how many, if any of you care about skate parks, but I know that there's more money being proposed for skate parks. I saw that there's proposals for the No Child Left Inside kind of thing that might be popping up. So we'll be watching that. I am actually going to post a link into the chat right now. And what this is it's sort of my list of bills that I'm keeping an eye on. And so it has our bills and some other bills. So if you're ever curious, at least which bills I'm watching for Parks and Trails purposes, that link will take you to it. But a lot of different things going on. Once we get the forecast out, we're going to turn a lot more towards talks of budget, and that's when the stuff we really care about starts popping up. So that's kind of all I have on content in terms of what's going on. Then I can kind of tell you about next steps. But does anyone have questions maybe about other bills that are happening at the legislature or anything going on there? No? Okay, well then I'm going to be telling you what you can do next. If you haven't done so already, make sure you're introducing yourself to your legislators and talking about Parks and Trails. Parks and Trails generally in Greater Minnesota is, as well as sorry, my email just got bonked here. Specifically what's going on in your area. Discuss our bills with them when they come up. But again, it's always better to lay the groundwork for the relationship with your legislature in advance. Always better to do that rather than come running to them when you need something. As I mentioned earlier, please ask your House rep to get on our HF 873. And you can always encourage your senator to support our funding as it goes by. But there will be more popping up. We'll be clearly all of you are checking your emails because you got this and you got on. We'll keep you up to date with action alerts during the legislative session. But that's all I have. Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay, well, I appreciate you taking the time. I hope this information was helpful. If there are topics that you'd like us to cover in a future legislative forum, let me know. Or if there's other forum topics you want to know about, you can contact Carlin or Gina or anybody on our communications committee. But we really appreciate your activism and your membership. It helps us get things done at the legislature. So thank you.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
This is Gina. For some reason, I'm just not finding my camera. There it is. Okay.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to thank you. That was really great information. It gives us a lot of context into how much is happening at the legislature and how important it is to stay connected, and just really appreciate your work, because without you staying on top of everything, I don't know that any of us would be able to do that. So it speaks to the importance of our membership dues and the size of our membership. So thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you. I appreciate the kind words. So.
Hey, Elizabeth, just real quick, Paul put it in the chat, the link that you sent for the bills that you're watching.
I will have to,
it's requiring a login to be able to look at it.
Okay, then I shared it incorrectly. 1 second. Keep talking and I'll put it incorrectly. It's not unheard of that I did something incorrectly. So
Yeah, I'll just jump in quick. Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. Very insightful. We appreciate everybody's work that they're doing to assist with keeping things moving forward for our goals as we move throughout this legislative session. I did just want to mention we are still looking for a representative for District 5 for our board. So if anybody southwest part of the state has any ideas, please reach out and let us know. We'd appreciate it. So, and thanks for joining.
Okay, I'm going to try. I think I have a link now. I think I did this. I think this is correct. Try this. See if this works. See if that one works. Well, if not, I'll have to go back to my technology cave and get to you later. So,
that still had a login on it.
okay, I don't know what's going on. You're usually supposed to be able to share it. So I apologize. I don't really understand why that's happening. So
Can you just send us a list?
You know, I can, the thing with the dynamic list is actually tells you when you have it up for hearing, so
Gotcha.
I don't.
Elizabeth and Carlin, why don't we maybe look to see if we can figure that out, that we can maybe get that in the newsletter that's gonna go out next week.
Okay,
Yeah,
that
that's what I
sounds
was
great,
thinking
yeah.
too.
Sorry about that.
So just to plug then, the newsletter's coming out next week, so watch for it. Hopefully it'll have this list for you.
Great,
Thanks you guys for all you do.
thank you. And hopefully we'll see you all again sometime soon. So take care.
Bye.
Elizabeth, can you hang on for just a sec? Or, she hopped off. Wow. That was fast. Brad.